Hello, everybody. Let me introduce myself. I'm Josh Wertheim, President of Wertheim Global Solutions, and I am joined today by Brent Reed, who is Director of our Development and Support. We'd like to thank those of you who have joined us today, as well as anybody who may watch this video in the future. Thank you for taking the time to listen to us, and we hope you learn something from what we have to say. I have been in the document management space since before the inception of PC network-based DM systems, and I was the first integrator for one of those PC network-based DM systems from a company called eDocs, which was ultimately acquired by OpenText about 18 years ago and is now called eDocs. I'm here today to talk to you about what we believe is a very overlooked aspect of security in most organizations, which is internal information theft, which, as we hope you will see, organizations do at their own peril. Now that I've given you my curriculum vitae, let us begin at the beginning. Is this where most of you focus your attention? External threats, spending your time and your money and all your resources on protecting yourselves from outside break-ins by hackers and people trying to do ransomware and introducing viruses into your systems? Do you use firewalls and every asset known to man to protect your repository from these external threats? Well, what we're going to try to tell you today is that external threats are only a part of the dangers faced by your organization. You also face internal threats. And by internal threats, what I'm referring to are people like disgruntled employees, people who leave the firm and want to take their information with them, somebody who wants to take information and use it for nefarious purposes, somebody who's a corporate spy for one of your competitors, somebody who wants to blow the whistle, etc. But I'm also talking about another group of people that you might not even consider. And those are the phishers. Phishers who phish a user's credentials, a user that has access to confidential information, and then pretending to be that person, logs into the system and downloads or accesses documents as if in order to steal them from your organization. Insider theft and these phishing attacks can be just as damaging as the external thefts can be. So what do all these people have in common? Whether it's Frances Haugen or Edward Snowden or Bradley or Chelsea Manning or the Pandora Papers or the Panama Papers or the MGM hack or the DNC email phishing hack, what do all these folks have in common? And there is a common thread across all of them. They were trusted, but they weren't being watched. They were granted access to confidential information. They stole that confidential information, or in the case of the DNC email phishing hack, they pretended to be Ron Podesta and stole the information that way. They used it for illegal or unethical purposes, and they did serious damage to their victims, sometimes without their victims' knowledge. And the victim learned about it when it was too late. Now, these are all famous hacks, but what about the ones that you don't hear about? The ones that hit your everyday businesses, such as yours? People like an HR clerk, or someone in finance, or maybe a salesperson who wants to take his client information with him to go work for a competitor. These are also people that need to be watched. I don't mean stood over 24/7, but a way of making sure that they're not doing something they shouldn't be doing. So why should you be concerned about internal information theft? Well, let's talk about your external information. Your external information is locked down tighter than a drum. Your model is the envy of everybody in the industry. Your method of assigning and auditing security is second to none, and you are absolutely sure there isn't one more thing you can do to prevent people from the outside breaking into your systems. And then someone with legitimate credentials sitting at their desk or sitting at home that has access to confidential information decides to steal it thinking you're not paying attention to what they're doing. This is why you need to pay attention to internal information theft. External thieves sneak in and steal information behind your back. Internal thieves steal your information right from under your noses and walk out the front door with it. You're never really ready for when confidential information is stolen. A lot of folks have incident response plans, but if that's all you have, it means you've given up on catching the thief and you're only focusing on doing damage control. And the day after a breach is one day too late. If you're concerned about your employees stealing information, and everybody should be, it's better to catch the thief in the act instead of learning about it after the fact. And the example we have here is the MGM hack, which was terrible hack for MGM, and it ended up being an employee stealing the information and then turning their systems into a pile of goo. So what are some examples of internal threats in an organization like yours? Well, it's 2 a.m. on a Sunday, and Barbara is home downloading client sales details to bring with her to her new sales job with your biggest competitor. It's the middle of the day. Larry is starting his own law firm, and along with two associates, is copying his client files so he can poach them once he tells your firm and leaves. John is leaving the company and wants to bring what he calls his work with him, although it's not his work, it's yours. It's your intellectual property. It doesn't belong to him just because he wrote it. He wrote it as an employee of yours, therefore you own it. Jane's credentials were stolen and are used to download confidential financial information. Fred has access to a merger, and the merger isn't public yet. And he wants to do a little insider trading. So he emails the relevant documents about the merger to himself, to his personal email address, and then he uses that to buy and sell stock. And then there's Jeff, who's downloading your trade secrets, and he's going to hold them for ransom. And if you don't pay it, he's going to release those trade secrets to the general public or to one of your biggest competitors. The first question you shouldn't be asking yourself is, what do we do if an employee steals our confidential information? It should be, what are we going to do to prevent the employee from stealing our confidential information? However, these are the problems you face. You don't know who it might be. You don't know what they want to take. You don't know why they want to take it. You don't know when they're going to take it. You don't know how they're going to take it or where they're going to take it, whether it's going to be from their home, from their office, from their PC, whether it's going to be their phone downloading the information. You don't know what they plan to do with what they steal. And you don't even know whether it's the actual employee or someone who phished their account. These are all serious problems that you have to deal with. So when you never know who it might be, how do you identify the bad actors and stop them from stealing stuff while it's happening? We have to trust our users. We have to trust our users with sensitive internal information, but it's necessary for us to trust them. And there's all sorts of information that different people have to be trusted with, whether it's financial or legal or HR or trade secrets or blueprints or negotiation details or something that's confidential for a client, or whether it's other things going on. You need to trust somebody in your organization with being able to access it and use it to do their job to protect you and protect their clients. But what happens when that trust fails? Internal theft management shouldn't rely on internal threat response. We talked about this a moment ago. Internal threat response is, I give up. I'm going to let the person walk out the door with my materials, and I'll deal with the damage later. Internal theft management begins with internal threat prevention, where you're stopping somebody from getting to the point where you have to respond to that threat or that robbery. And then, of course, you have to know the difference between your bad actors, which make up a very small percentage of your people, if any. And these include your authorized users, as well as the people who phished credentials. And you have to be able to identify them and stop them while not stopping the rest of your organization from doing their work. So what do you need? You need what I call a firewall. You need a firewall to prevent the user from stealing the stuff, and then you have to respond to it. And when you have that firewall in place, you can stop the person from stealing the information. You become the hero. You have stopped a disaster from happening, and you are the person getting the credit. So these are the questions you have to ask yourself. Have you ever had someone take information out of your repository without permission? How did you find out that they did it? Did you find out when they released it to the public? Did you find out when you started losing clients to the competition? How did you find out? When you found out, what did you have to do to determine what had actually happened? Are you concerned that somebody may be taking information right now? If you're in an organization with 10,000 users in 42 locations, how are you going to determine which one of those 10,000 people is going to be the one who's going to be taking information as we speak? Are you concerned that your users may be susceptible to phishing attacks? Of course you are. Everybody is. I get phishing attacks all the time. I get emails that look legitimate, and what I do is I click on the name to see what the underlying email address is, and if I realize that's not really the person who it says it is, I mark it as a phishing email, and I save myself from having to click on and give away my store. Do you have a way of identifying when your user or when a fisher is actually taking your information while it's happening? And if someone was doing it right this very second while you're watching this webinar, how would you know? Let's say somebody's stealing your stuff in the next office. How would you know? Or if somebody's doing it from home, how would you know? Do you have a way of stopping them while it's happening? Or do you have to go back to your logs after the fact to learn what had been stolen? And then what are the consequences? What would happen to you and your business if this information was stolen and then leaked or used against you or your clients? I believe this is what your goal should be, to be able to say, if Edward Snowden worked here, we could stop him. Think about Edward Snowden for just a second. The man had security clearance to all the documents at the NSA. He walked in, or he did it from home. I don't know where he was, just that he was in Hawaii. And he downloaded 1.8 million of the most sensitive documents at the most sensitive organization in the entire US government, the NSA. He walked out the door, got on an airplane to Hong Kong, and handed them to a reporter for the Guardian newspaper, who printed 1.8 million documents exposing all the dirty little secrets of the NSA and causing all sorts of embarrassment. I read somewhere a couple of days ago that the cost to the US government of what he did was $64 billion. $64 billion because this one person was able to walk out the door with 1.8 million documents. Think about that for a second. Okay, so how do you stop someone? That's the question I'm sure everybody is asking. Well, that's where we come in with our product called Guardian. How does Guardian Internal Threat Prevention protect your information? It monitors user activities in real time and acts upon those activities in real time. So if a user is acting fishy or doing something fishy, it will send alerts and even, if necessary, disable the account of a user who continues to take information that they shouldn't. So what is Guardian? It is a DLP, data loss prevention compliance solution for OpenText. Specifically, right now works with Content Server and extended ECM, as well as eDocs. It is also written, I should say, to be able to extend to other platforms such as Documentum and SharePoint. Any application that records activities is a candidate for Guardian to be incorporated into its solution. What it does is it helps minimize internal risks by enabling you to detect and then investigate and then act upon malicious activities right when they're happening. It allows you to define the types of risks you want to look for. and detect within your organization, such as perhaps downloading or emailing or copying documents, including the action the rule should take, whether somebody should be notified, who should be notified, whether the account should be disabled if the rule keeps on getting violated. Management can then take this information and then take the appropriate actions necessary to make sure users' actions adhere to your organization's compliance standard. And if they don't, you show them the door and contact the proper authorities. So what we'd like to do is we'd like to show you the demo now. However, as I'm doing the presentation, I happen to get a notification. So allow me to turn off the presentation for just a second. And this is my phone. And you'll notice that I got a notification on my phone that somebody violated a rule that Guardian caught. So let's take a look at what that rule is. Okay, so I got notification in the middle of my demo that says a Guardian rule has exceeded an established threshold, and the user has been disabled. So it tells you the name of the rule that was violated. It tells you what library and content server the user was in. It tells you who the user was, when it happened, and what the activity was that the person was doing, which in this case was zip and download. And then what it does is it will show you the 10 most recent documents that caused this alert to be sent out. So now I've been notified that Edward Snowden has been locked out of the system because he's been disabled. Now I can come back in and I can call the office and say, get this guy out of here. And by the way, contact the police because he's taken stuff that he shouldn't be taken. And instead of Edward Snowden walking out the door with 1.8 million documents, he's gotten his hands on a couple of dozen maybe, or maybe even 100. And you've stopped Edward Snowden in his tracks. That's what Guardian does. So now that I have shown you that, let's go back to Brent and watch the demo.
Well, thanks, Josh. That's quite an introduction to the demo. As you can see on the screen here, this is the Guardian management screen, the management console.
Brent, we're not seeing your screen.
Okay. Let's stop sharing and restart again. Here we go. Share my screen a second time. Okay. And does it come up this time?
Yes, it has.
All right. Okay, this is the Enterprise Management Console for Guardian. And since we have a user that was just disabled, I'll sort of alter the order of the demo. And let's go and look at our disabled users. As Josh said, he got the notification that someone had been in downloading documents. And this is what you see when you go into Guardian to investigate that user and check up on them. So the notification that Josh got on his phone tells you some of the information, and you can see that it's reiterated here. You have the username, you see which rule that they broke, the description, what activity they were performing, and who the user was, and the date. It also gives you some additional information. You can see what they were doing. So they downloaded a total of 221 documents before the trigger kicked in. It also shows what violation activity happened for the period that they were working. And it gives you an insight into the last 7 days of their activity. So you can see what they've been doing. So you can see that the other day they downloaded a bunch of documents, then they downloaded a few more, and then today they went above the threshold. So they hit a line above their normal activity, and that's what flagged their account by Guardian to notify us that, hey, something's up. You can also look at what other things they've been doing. They've been printing some documents, reclassifying, copying, they deleted. So you can really get a good picture of what that user's been doing over the last week. So you can see, what led up to this breaking of the predictive rule. So like I said, we're going a little bit backwards. You'll understand all this information a little better as I walk through how Guardian works. But this shows you the end result and the information that Guardian gives you about someone who has violated a rule. Now, should we decide that this was normal activity, say we contact Edward Snowden's boss and he said, oh yes, I gave him an extra project to work on, that's perfectly fine that he's downloading these documents. You can let him continue on. All we have to do is click on this and re-enable the user. And then that user can get back to work. Because, hey, sometimes false positives will happen. So it's really easy for the user to get back on their task and continue their work. Let's go back to the beginning. Guardian is set up to monitor activities and watch for variations in the amount of the activity that a user performs. So when we create a rule, we give it a name. This is for content server. And as you can see up here, there's one interface, and we can support multiple libraries. So we can also support an eDocs library from the same interface. And we can support multiple content server libraries as well. We're going to concentrate on the content server today, and the functionality is the same no matter what product you're using. So you basically set up some information about the rule. Is it allowed to disable users and re-enable them? And what kind of rule period are you using? Because we do have custom counts that we can use for testing the system. So you can put in some test values, like if somebody downloads more than 100 documents in an hour, then it'll send out an alert. And that's a good way to test the system. But the predictive analysis is the brains of Guardian. It's a complex algorithm that looks at the user's past behavior and compares it to their current behavior and determines the difference. Now, on this next screen, you choose the activities that you're going to be monitoring, and then you set up the thresholds at which you want to get notifications. So, for example, we were using the zip and download. And that's a good one to start with because that gets documents out of your system and out from under the control of the system so somebody can do whatever they want, post them, distribute them, whatever. So we're monitoring the zip and download activity. And what this 120 means is that when the user's behavior is 120% above normal, then it will notify the group that you specify in this window. So in this case, if somebody normally downloads 100 documents a day and they get to 120, well, that first level notification group is going to get an email saying, hey, this user hit this first threshold. And the user doesn't know anything. The user is totally unaware that this is going on. And at that point, the manager can look at it, look at the behavior, and determine, hey, is this, normal behavior, or do we want to keep a close eye on this person? Or say, for example, it's happening at 2 o'clock in the morning and nobody's there to get the email. That's why we have a second threshold. If the user keeps going and reaches 140% in this instance, which is what the 140 is, it's going to perform the action of disabling their account, and it's going to notify the level 2 notification group, which could be some of the same people or different people. That's up to you for your organization to determine. But at this point, their account's disabled. They won't be able to do anything. They won't be able to log in, open a document, print a document, nothing. So this successfully stops someone from doing more damage than possible. They have to still be able to do their job, so you can't deny them the opportunity to perform these activities. But this keeps them from going above and beyond. It spots irregular activities. Some of the other activities that we're monitoring are deleting documents. So if someone's deleting more documents than they normally would, or if they're moving them from one place to another, copying a bunch of documents, maybe changing the attributes, or even viewing documents. You can view a document, take a screen print, and once again, it takes it out from under control of your document management system that has security in place, and then it can be placed out into the wild. It can also monitor login failures or any activity that is logged by the document management system. So you can add additional activities simply by choosing, we're doing a content server, and we want to add an activity. So we might change, maybe we want to know how many times somebody logs in. If they log in more times than normal, then that's another activity that we could start monitoring. So we would set what we wanted for the activity level. If they're logging in 150% times more often than they usually do, Then we're going to say, let's notify this first level group. And then let's do the second one for our disable. So if we say at 180%, then we disable the account. And again, we're going to notify the second level group. So that's how easy it is to add another activity into your monitoring. So you can monitor as many activities as you want. You can also add different levels. So for example, maybe we wanted to put a level in between on this login, and let's go ahead and add that. You can actually have 3 levels. Excuse me, I didn't check my content server first. And then add my login. And on this one, let's put it right in the middle. Let's say 170. We'll have another notify in between. So that way we don't disable people too early. And then we can save that. And now we have 3 levels that we're monitoring the login on, and it won't disable until it hits the 3rd. And this is a decision for you to make within your company to decide, how loose or how tight you want your rules to be. If you wanted to be very strict, you could disable someone's account the first time they hit 1 threshold. However, that could get in the way of doing business and could cause, a lockout when it's not necessary. So we recommend that you have at least 2 levels. Now, we do have some granularity because not everybody works with the most sensitive documents in a company. So this particular rule applies to everybody in the library. However, if we wanted to create some really tight rules with lower thresholds for someone like HR, we could create a rule and apply it, say, to, well, let's say here's legal. The legal, of course, they have very sensitive documents. So we might put some very strict thresholds on our legal department. So that way, if their credentials get phished or we have a bad apple in the legal department, they're really limited in the damage they'd be able to do. At an even more granular level, you could add a single user. Say, for example, you hired somebody from one of your competitors, and you're not quite sure if their motives are pure or if they might be there as a spy for their boss. You could create a rule for a particular user that is really strict and would let you know if they started performing suspicious activities, but it wouldn't apply to everybody in the company. So you can keep an eye on somebody, say, for the first 6 months or a year to make sure that they're, legitimate and they are who they say they are. So for the purpose of the demo, I'm going to remove these. Just wanted to show you the granularity that you have and the flexibility you have. So you've now seen Guardian. It's very, very simple, and in its simplicity is what gives it its power. It's very easy to set up. You choose the activities you're going to monitor. You decide the levels that you want to monitor and set the thresholds for, and you decide who you're going to monitor. And then you sit back and let it do its job. And again, that's it in a nutshell. So you have the benefit of a very simple, easy to use system that is very powerful and runs 24/7 and lets you know when there's a problem instead of you finding out after the fact. And that concludes the demo part. And I'm ready to turn it back over to Josh so he can tell you a little bit more about how Guardian works and how it can benefit your company.
Well, thank you, Brent. I expanded the watch demo now slide to kind of give you an idea of what the rule notifications look like again. So you can see this is an SMS message. It can be SMS. It could be any carrier. It could be any email address to anybody that you want to make it to. In my case, my messages were coming to me SMS. So this is what they look like. I wanted to give you a close-up shot of how they look. And okay, so I'm going to get back to Guardian and what it does, which we call proactive activity monitoring. So proactive activity monitoring is based upon each user's work habits, where some users download a lot and some users download infrequently, or they send emails frequently, or some don't at all. And so what Guardian does is it always analyzes what they're doing versus what their history of activities are in the past. So when in Brent's example, where he set a rule where downloading 120% of their normal workload of documents would trigger a notification. Well, for a person who downloads 100 documents an hour, it wouldn't hit until it wouldn't send a notification until that person hit 120. But a person who downloads one document a week or 0 documents a week, and all of a sudden starts downloading documents, that notification will go out pretty much instantaneously once they start downloading documents. So what it does is when it hits a threshold for a user, it identifies and reports on the suspicious activity while it's happening. You get that notification while Edward Snowden is sitting at his desk downloading documents. As you saw, when the highest threshold is met, the user is automatically disabled. And when I say disabled, it is instantaneous. As soon as that threshold is hit, that says disable the user. If they are in the process of downloading 9 documents and they're at the 3rd document when the threshold is hit, the 4th document, when it gets to their 4th document, they get a log out, a screen that they're logged out. And when they try to log back in, they can't. So imagine someone like Edward Snowden sitting at home at 2 o'clock in the morning thinking he's going to be downloading all these documents. And after the 3rd document in his 40-second batch is downloaded, all of a sudden he's logged out. And he has no idea why, no idea what happened. He doesn't think he's being watched, but he is, not by a person, but by Guardian. So you don't have to wait until your secured documents are long gone before you can act. And you can monitor, as Brent showed you, individual activities or groups of activities, individual users or groups or all users. And it does allow for exceptions. So for instance, if a user is going to be doing some e-discovery, and that requires a activity that is more than their normal boundary would be, you can set it up that this user is excluded for a certain amount of time from being monitored for that particular activity. So let me give you a couple of use cases to kind of show you the kinds of things that Guardian can help you with. So the first is a legal example where a law firm thinks that an attorney is planning to leave the firm and is planning on taking what he calls or she calls their documents with them. Now, in the legal profession, it's very interesting because when you work for a law firm, whatever work you do on behalf of a client that belongs to the law firm, it is the law firm's intellectual property. It is not yours. However, there are a lot of people in law firms that think if I created a document for a client, that I should be able to take that document, they call it boilerplate sometimes, and be able to use that in my new location, whether it's for another law firm or whether it's for going to work for a different, for himself, starting his own practice. And so you're not allowed to take those documents with you. So in this case, Guardian watches for those unusual patterns of behavior. So when all of a sudden the attorney is extracting larger than normal amounts of those documents, the notifications go out, or if the notifications can't be processed or are ignored, at some point the Guardian can disable the attorney's access. Now, to take this one step further, let's say that the attorney hasn't told anybody in the firm he's leaving. So you don't know that he's in the process of doing this. By catching the attorney in the act of stealing these documents or trying to steal these documents, all of a sudden you know that this attorney is planning on leaving. And you might want to show him the door a little sooner before he can take or try to take more documents and steal some of the clients he may be working on or she may be working on. The phishing example is the next example. It's 2 a.m. on a Sunday, and the hacker connects in as the end user and starts downloading documents again. Well, Guardian is on 24/7, and if an attack occurs in the middle of the night while the people in the notification list are asleep, it can be set to disable the user until such time in the morning that the notification recipients see the notification and can act upon it. And the third example, which is actually based upon real life, is someone in an investment bank is working on a sensitive IPO, and he decides he wants to do a little insider trading. And in order to do that, he needs to have the documents in his possession so that he can make the trade, whether it's shorting the stock or buying the stock. So Guardian can monitor a set of activities for members of the IPO group. And if any of the people who are working on the IPO are doing unusual things, it can notify the security officer, who can then check on what the person's doing and whether or not to disable the user. And if it's in the middle of the night, as we said before, can disable the user pending review by the security officer when the notification is viewed. Typically, in an investment bank, the security office is open 24/7, so that's probably not relevant. They'll see that notification whatever time of day or night it comes. Okay, so as you can tell, I hope you can tell, Guardian is written for specific applications. In this particular case, it's written so far for content server and for eDocs. But as I think I mentioned earlier, any application that monitors activities or records activities that users are performing is a candidate for Guardian. And why is that important? A lot of folks tell us that they have this, what I'll call generic application that watches over people, and why should they get something that's application specific? Well, as you can see, there are a lot of reasons that we recommend the application approach as opposed to the generic approach. First of all, users do not directly access the file systems or the databases when they're using systems like Content Server or eDocs. Generic systems usually look at the file system. He's accessed 400 files off of the network share, and that'll trigger a notification. Or perhaps he's accessed the database and run some reports that normally he wouldn't run, and getting to what they would call confidential information, which he shouldn't have access to. So because of that, a generic application will never catch a user who's downloading documents through a middle tier to get those documents into his lap. Application-specific protection monitors the user's activity within the application. So it knows when something is downloaded or attached to an email, or if security is changed. None of those things can happen with a generic system. The application usually records historical activity data back from the beginning of time. So the proactive analysis can always investigate what the person has been doing for the last week, what the last year, for the last 17 years, if the person has been there that long. Not only that, but applications that integrate with either Content Server or eDocs are automatically included. So as an example, when let's say you have SAP integrated with Content Server into what's now called xECM. Well, when a user in SAP accesses a record in Content Server, that access is recorded. So you can actually incorporate SAP by having that capability. You're actually incorporating SAP into your security model to protect yourself from internal abuse. A user in an application may be different than a user in a network. For instance, you might have a network group called litigators, but you may have an application group for each particular litigation client. So if you're doing a group rule based upon litigators, you may only want to have the rule applied to the ones that are working on a specific merger or a specific case. And having the group rules based upon network groups won't work in this particular instance. Generic systems may not understand the relevance of the different activities, especially any custom activities that may be added by an integrated solution. So I believe SAP has its own series of activities that they add into the content server system for the SAP activities that people perform. Well, a generic application will never know that, but Guardian can incorporate those custom activities right into its rules. And they can interpret the results of application-specific results. How do they differentiate in a records and document management system between a user who's downloading a document versus accessing a record? They can't. If a user's accessing a record, they're not going to download it because it's not something that's downloadable. It's not a file. It's a SQL record. So Guardian can interpret the difference because it's application specific, and the generic systems can't do any of that. So your internal information security should not rely on trust alone. We're down to the message. You have to trust, but you also have to verify that your trust is well. And this is a quote from an actual post-mortem that was done by someone who had a user hack into their system. I call it hacked, but stole documents from their system. And I'm going to read this verbatim. A review of system logs conducted after the documents were stolen and released pointed to a single individual who was a member of a team with access rights to top secret documents. Now, that team could have been 1,000 people. It could have been 3, but they didn't know this particular person was stealing documents until the documents were out the door. And that's what you want to prevent. Place, time. So I'm going to go back to one of my original slides here, where I talked about external threats and internal threats. And we talked about how you probably spend a lot of your resources on dealing with external threats, but there are internal threats as well, and the types of internal threats there are, we discussed that. But you notice there's a direct line between the internal threats and the server. So what you need is the same kind of firewall for your internal documents that you have for your external information. And that's where Guardian comes in. It's your firewall for internal threat prevention. And with that, I'd like to say thank you. If you would like to download an e-brochure or request a demo or ask a question about Guardian internal threat prevention, you can visit our website, www.wertheimglobal.com, or send an email to our sales@wertheimglobal.com. And with that, I thank you once again for your attention, whether you are watching this live or on a YouTube video. Thanks again, and we look forward to hearing from you. And with that, I say take care. Goodbye.